Hi Rob, and welcome to the Enterprise Mobility Exchange. My first question for you is, what key trends do you think are impacting the mobility market at the moment?
Definitely seeing a lot of multi-platform development. Obviously, apps is a big thing, and we've seen this evolution of different ways to do apps on multiple platforms. We had this MEAP thing for a while, Mobile Enterprise Application Platform, and MADP, and now we've got this mobile backend as a service. I'm also seeing IDE tools like from folks like Xamarin, and lots of ones like PhoneGap, where they're doing the hybrid web kind of native type thing. You're seeing a lot of people experimenting with a lot of those different tools. I've seen different companies try to use a lot of those kind of prepackaged deals with lots of connectors, with a IDE that would generate code for the different platforms. And we've started to see a lot of those MEAP vendors fade away. I've seen lots of acquisitions or people just disappearing, and I've seen a lot of them moving to this backend as a service. I'm seeing a confluence or whatever of these API companies. It's like what's old is new again. Over a decade ago, we had this SOAP XML thing, and everybody was going to build these service-oriented architectures. Some people did it, not everybody. And so I'm thinking what it looks like now is this idea of these REST JSON APIs that any mobile device can talk to, exposing back-end systems, and then either using HTML5 or some of these other tools, like these cross-platform tools. You're just seeing a lot of that, and because the problem is it takes a lot of time and knowledge to learn different programming languages and different technologies, so it's difficult. I'm still bullish on HTML5. I know it's got a lot of sand kicked in its face over the years, for being not performant enough. But I think the fact that we have this browser war going on, again, like the good old days, the browsers are getting so much faster, the JavaScript's getting faster. The web controls that they use to build these hybrid apps, kind of like PhoneGap or Cordova, those are getting faster. And so I think I'm still looking for HTML5 to kind of make a comeback or surge again, just because for pragmatic reasons. One way to build things across platforms makes a lot of sense, and if you can tap into native APIs.
When it comes to current challenges in mobility, what would you say are the key things that are keeping CIOs awake at night?
This will just sound boring, but it's still security. Security is keeping CIOs up at night. Every day we're reading about all these hack attacks all over the world against companies, against governments, and it's nonstop. And credit card information being stolen, just all kinds of intellectual property. And many CIOs are afraid that mobile, the devices, are actually the weakest link in the chain. And so they're extra worried about that. And so while they want to do things like BYOD and try to empower their employees, they're very afraid that at the same time they may be opening the door to security problems. And so as a result of that, we've had discussions at the conference this week, about some people retreating from BYOD a little bit. I see that here and there. I think we're getting to a point where there's a more of a lockdown list of devices to choose from rather than just bring whatever. And so you're seeing CIOs kind of, and a lot of times you might see a mobile center of excellence at a particular company, and they kind of define, well, here's the list of devices that are approved that has the security compliance and the encryption and the manageability. And so you're seeing kind of a smaller list of devices that we allow. And then on top of that, then a lot of the enterprise mobility management products, this EMM thing, successor to MDM, definitely trying to find ways to, in a good way, lock down the device for security reasons, not to kill productivity, but to find in the easiest, lightest touch way to feel secure about that. And because it really comes down to data. We had MDM at the beginning, which was let's just lock down the whole device, to protect the data. But a lot of people would push back against that because they felt like it just sucked the life out of their phone. Then you had this mobile application management, or MAM, where it says, well, you know what? What if we just apply security policies right to the apps themselves, and maybe we'll lax or let go of a little MDM stuff here, because we'll control the data that way. And so that's better. And then I think where we're moving to is this other thing, this mobile information management, where you see rights management applied right to the data itself, to documents, wherever it travels, and flows and rests, to try to, you want to have a light touch, you don't want to kill the promise of mobility while securing it. So I think a lot of those things are definitely going on.
What changes and solutions need to be in place for enterprise mobility leaders to really take advantage of enterprise mobility for business success?
That's a good question. I've seen some surveys that talk about how most enterprises, their back-end infrastructure systems are wholly unprepared for the mobile onslaught. A lot of people are thinking or hoping that they can use the same back-end servers, whatever the things they use to run their business today that's worked for them for decades. They want to just connect their mobile devices to that, and they are hoping it all works. So there's the integration problem first. But what we're finding is a lot of these back-end systems weren't prepared for the scale or the performance requirements of these mobile devices, or the fact that we now have people that instead it used to be one-to-one, I had a laptop, and now we have people that says I have 5 different devices. At Microsoft, we first started noticing this when lots of people use Exchange Server for email. And there's a certain type of Exchange server, a client access server that sits at the front where people who are getting mobile email connect to over the internet. And we started seeing customers having to increase the number of those servers because they're like, wow, they're really taking a beating and we don't know why. Oh, well, it's because now every person has multiple devices all trying to get their email against the same infrastructure. And so this applies to all kinds of line of business systems that aren't ready. Two things. They all speak a different language. All these back-end systems, either bespoke that were built by, on their own, or different packages bought from big companies over the years. The way they talk to systems is different for each one, and none of them will talk to mobile devices natively. And then all of a sudden, and it's a scale problem. Maybe you have these systems that were designed for hundreds or thousands of people, and now all of a sudden you've got tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, or some cases where a company is building, let's say, a marketing app to reach out to prospective customers, and it pulls back data back to their back-end systems for telemetry. Whoops, what if it got really popular, and now millions of people are using that app, and they're hitting your systems that were designed for 10,000 people. So companies are going to have to spend a lot of time and unfortunately a lot of money upgrading those back-end systems or putting things in front, the whole API thing, putting these REST JSON compressed APIs in front of those systems to translate all those different ways they talk language-wise into a single way that mobile can talk to, but also then try to provide caching or other mechanisms to take the blows from all these devices so that it doesn't have to hit these systems that weren't ready. Some people will do that. Other people will probably just say, this is too much, we're going to move to the cloud. And a lot of people will do that too.
What would you say are the main drivers and investments behind mobile and enterprise technology?
Again, the big driver a lot of times is apps. I mean, you've got the BYOD thing with people devices. Employees and customers are demanding to use mobile devices, so phones, tablets, etc. And so then the next step is apps, and we've seen giant consumer apps, but now we're seeing these enterprise apps being built. Here's where a big investment's going to come from, and it's not something you hear all the time. So what you may not know is that I think it's 2.4, 2.7 million active Win32 Windows apps are running global business today. Lots of people kind of talk about, why is Apple and IBM getting together, or what are we trying to do here or there? The elephant in the room is that enterprises made the shift to Microsoft technology 20 years ago. And Microsoft kind of took over most enterprises. And so they started building Windows apps all through the 90s with Visual Basic and Delphi and Power Builder and all those tools. And then they did .NET and Java. Well, those apps, and they're huge. They might run power plants or pipelines or financial systems. They're giant. They might have hundreds of screens. They're very complex systems talking to big databases. Those things are going to have to be moved to mobile devices. That's where, people love to call those systems legacy systems. I never use that term because I feel like it's talking down to those companies. Those systems run their business, and they're great systems. If they want to move to this new mobile platform, it's not just about being mobile, but the idea of these new generation of kind of sandboxed apps that are different than how we used to build them, where they're safer, they can't talk to each other, it reduces security problems in addition to being mobile. So the problem is these mobile apps, typically they're very task-focused, they're smaller. No one wants to take a 400-screen giant app that runs a natural gas pipeline and build the same giant thing on a phone. what they're going to do is they're going to build lots of smaller versions. So imagine these apps being broken up to 10, 20, or 30 different discrete parts. And those are all going to be the mobile apps. Now multiply that times the over 2, 3, 4 million active Win32 apps that people use in business today, and think about that migration. That's a lot of money. That's a big driver of investment, but that's what's going to happen. And I'm not just talking about them moving it to newer Windows platforms or Windows Phone. If you're going to go to the iPhone or to Android, any of them, you're going to still follow those same paradigms. And so they're all going to be splintered. And then when you combine that with the last question, those back-end systems that aren't ready, they all have to be upgraded, and the integration. We are talking probably the biggest investment in IT that we've seen, in 20 or 30 years.
How do you think that mobility is changing the way that CIOs work with the rest of the C-suite? Is mobility moving up the business agenda?
It absolutely is. Probably begrudgingly at first. But that being said, a lot of mobility started with executives. Let's not forget the BlackBerry, which kind of got this whole thing started. I know lots of people think that mobility didn't start until the iPhone 3GS or something, but we know it went, we had our Windows mobile devices and smartphones. So luckily, a lot of that started with executives, and so they realized the importance of it, and they're asking for things. So they're absolutely much more relevant. A lot of it, though, still comes down to the personality or the type of CIO you're talking about, and this transcends mobility. When you look out there, there's a high percentage of CIOs are just keeping the lights on, keeping the trains running on time, the email server still working, and then this really small percentage of CIOs are truly innovators, and they're trying to disrupt and change the business for the better, and they work closely with the business groups. We have all seen the diminishing importance of IT, over the last decade, and so for IT to be more relevant, and it takes those kind of CIOs that not only it's not just about mobility, it's that personality and the drive that says IT is a partner with all these business units, and we want to work together to transform our business rather than, hey, we're just keeping the email servers running or the telecom connections going, because if that happens, business units, we're seeing with SaaS apps, the different lines of business, marketing, sales, they're all going on their own, and they're buying their own things, and they're not even including IT. So that's kind of the big game right now, I think.
Where do you think the mobility market is headed in the next 3 to 5 years? What do you think will have the biggest impact, and why?
This won't sound very futuristic, but the cloud. And the cloud has been a real enabler of consumer mobile apps. Lots of startups, they needed some cheap place to have that back-end connection for whatever app they were giving you, whether it's a social media app or something like that, because they couldn't afford to have their own data centers. So getting enterprises to feel comfortable with the cloud is part of that big deal. They've been reluctant. We're seeing it moving. Microsoft, Azure's growing triple digits, and it's great. But we talk to people all the time, and they're terrified about the security of their data. And so lots of people have been dragging their feet. They also have huge investments in their own on-premise data centers. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're finally going to break through. I think a lot of these companies, they're going to finally trust cloud providers like Microsoft that, maybe we can do a better job of running their servers and data centers, and maybe we are more secure than they might be. I know they'll never say it out loud, but I think, and then when you do that, I remember years ago when I first started doing, I'd speak at these conferences on developing stuff, and I always thought that mobile in the cloud was like peanut butter and chocolate. They just go together so well, because we need to support mobile devices that are all over the globe, and the best way to do that is from these cloud data centers like Microsoft. We have dozens, they're all over the place, close to where you are, whereas in the past, if a company just has their own data center, it might just be one in the city where they're headquartered, and they're not going to be able to serve mobile clients that well. And so it's not imaginative, but just getting everybody to the cloud in the enterprise, it's going to help us with security. We're going to enforce best practices on how we connect. A lot of these concepts I talked about for kind of those multi-platform REST JSON web services or data sync type thing, that's going to be a natural fit in the cloud. And it's also going to help a lot of customers who can't afford to replace or improve or beef up those old systems. They're just going to be able, we're just going to sidestep that problem and go straight to the cloud to do it. So I think that's probably going to be the best helper for everybody.